Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Adriaan and I'm the Dutch ambassador. I want to welcome you all to this webinar on circular construction and demolition. I'm glad to see so many of you present today. Let me begin by thanking Freek van Eijk, CEO of Holland Circular Hotspot, and Geraldine Brennan of Circulaire for organizing today's event. Today is about circular construction and demolition, about sustainability, and about reducing waste. It comes at a crucial time. We are faced with existential challenges. The climate change crisis is going to cause major disruptions if it is not tackled. That is also why, for us, as Dutch Embassy, sustainability is the key priority for cooperation with Ireland. Let's be honest, the circular economy should be the economic model of the future. It is the only way forward if we want to realize our climate goals and build a future for the next generation. And if we get this right, we can create a healthy economy for decades to come. Construction and demolition is one of the biggest sustainability challenges at the moment. Its waste comprises the largest waste stream in the EU, and it is hence logical that the EU's Circular Economy Action Plan, published last year, pays special attention to the construction sector. And the EU's Sustainable Product Policy Framework will guide the design and production of all products. Now, especially with the wave of reconstruction, renovation, and refitting here in Ireland, and the need in the whole of Europe gaining pace as we come out of the COVID-19 crisis, we need to change. And in my eyes, simply put, we need to make construction and demolition circular. But we can only get to a true circular economy by businesses cooperating and through international collaboration. Building on experience from others, sharing new ideas, and demolishing conventional working methods. And by government and business working together so that we can accelerate the transition to a circular economy. And that's basically what today's event is all about. Today is about finding sustainable solutions together, about sharing best practices, about leading examples and learning from each other, so that Irish and Dutch companies and knowledge institutions work together to identify circular opportunities and support local circular entrepreneurship, whether in Ireland or the Netherlands. And therefore, I'm delighted with today's speakers, an impressive lineup of leading Dutch and Irish professionals, willing to share their knowledge and expertise with all of us today to build a better future together. On the 27th of November 2020, Circulaire, the Irish platform for circular manufacturing, was launched. It was also the start of the partnership between Circulaire and Holland Circular Hotspot, the Dutch platform for circular economy. And I'm glad that this partnership is already paying off. I then stated that it is time for action. We're sharing lots of practices from businesses, from Ireland, and from the Netherlands. And that is exactly what we do here today. Climate change action is a priority for Ireland, for the Netherlands, worldwide. Let's deliver on this by creating circular revolution in construction and demolition and make the circular shift together. I wish you all a very fruitful and inspirational webinar. Now, I would like to give the floor back to Freek van Eijk, who will be moderating this event, but not without saying to our Irish friends, stay in touch with the Dutch. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. And thank you again for bringing Holland Circular Hotspot and Circulaire together today around this topic. A very warm welcome also from my side. I'm Freek van Eijk, Director of Holland Circular Hotspot. I'm proud to be your moderator. Next slide, please. Now, Just a little bit about Holland Circular Hotspot. What we want is to make circular economy happen at the international level. And we do that by sharing best practices from companies like we do today. We share the tools and insights from the knowledge institutes, and we share the hard-learned lessons from our government. And together with our embassies and partners like Circulaire, we create new mutual business opportunities. Now, as a moderator, I want to remind you that this session is being recorded, so the use of your camera is at your own discretion. Please mute your microphone if you're not a speaker. I want you to engage actively today, and you can use the Q&A session, Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to ask questions to all the speakers. For more generic comments or sharing links, you can use the chat function. Now, the topic of today is extremely interesting, like the ambassador already pointed out. We have to make the built environment more circular, because it accounts in Europe for half of extracted materials, half of total energy consumption, 1/3 of water consumption, 1/3 of waste generation, 1/3 of carbon dioxide emissions. But the good news, the next slide, is that there are plenty of opportunities possible already today, from the beginning of the value chain to the end. It's about new materials, it's about new design with total cost of ownership and life cycle in mind. It's about building as material depots, buildings as a service. It's about modularity. It's integration of various technologies within buildings. It's about modular buildings designed to be disassembled, designed to be reused, designed to be remanufactured, and designed to be recycled, just to mention a few things. And it can be done today. Next slide. But the truth is that circular economy is a system change, and we will need, despite all the good actions and leadership from businesses, we need also actions from regulators. Businesses can't do it alone. They need the ambition, and they also need the boundary conditions from the regulator. Now, everywhere in the value chain, actions will be needed. Topics can range from, just to mention just a few, mandatory targets for recyclate, or for life cycle thinking and carbon accounting, to simple things like harmonized standards for aggregates, or a pull factor by circular procurement. And as the ambassador said as well, there is a unique momentum. I'm not only referring to the European Green Deal or the Paris Agreement, but also hinting at the EU renovation wave and the EU and national recovery funds. If you just imagine that 75% of the building stock is energy inefficient, and that probably 85–95% of that building stock might still be around in 2050. So if we're going to renovate, let's start doing that in a circular way. Now let's turn to Ireland. Now for us, Ireland is a lot more than great beer and fantastic rugby. It's about one of the countries that score very high in terms of ease of doing business for Dutch entrepreneurs. I believe they're number 24 out of 190. They have very high ambitions regarding climate action. They want to reduce food waste by 50%, and they want to have 70% of their energy sourced from renewables. Actually, when we were trying to map the opportunities for Dutch entrepreneurs going circular in Ireland, we came up with sectors like agri-food and beverage, offshore wind, plastics, pharma, ICT, and of course, we also have the topic of the webinar of today. The topic is construction and demolition. And I believe that 35% of public spending went into roads and housing alone. But there is also room for improvement, because the recycling rate, the recovery rate of construction and demolition waste, for example, is just 9%. And that, as the Dutch will point out, you can probably do better than that. Well, this webinar was created thanks to the collaboration between Holland Circular Hotspot and Circulaire. So it makes perfect sense to hear from Geraldine Brennan, one of the key persons behind Circulaire, why they organized this webinar and why this topic is so important today. Over to you, Geraldine.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. Thank you very much, Freek, and thank you very much to Ambassador Palm for, as Freek has said, bringing Circulaire and Holland Circular Hotspot together. We are very proud to be Ireland's first dedicated EU circular hotspot. So just a quick overview of what Circulaire is and why we formed. essentially, our raison d'etre is about seeking to close what we term the circular innovation gap in Ireland. What that points to is effectively the knowledge, capacity building and implementation gap with regards to circular economy. 1 second with regards to those slides. And essentially what you have in front of you is just an overview of our membership. So we are a cross-sectoral public-private partnership. We're the first circular economy innovation network in Ireland. And our raison d'etre and mission is to accelerate the transition towards a net zero carbon circular economy over the 3-year period between 2020 and 2022. And what we're mindful of is the circular economy is something that requires collaboration, not only within sectors like construction, but between sectors. So between actors in the built environment and construction, between medical devices and packaging, food and drinks and pharmaceuticals, and ultimately embracing actors which we term as second life enablers, extended producer responsibility schemes, product lifecycle management actors, material reprocessors. And it would be remiss of me not to flag who IMR are. We are an EPA Ireland. We're not an EPA Ireland. We're an Enterprise Ireland, IDA Ireland supported technology center. And we formed Circulaire in collaboration with 3 strategic partners, the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications, the Environmental Protection Agency in Ireland, and EIT Climate Kick. Next slide, please. How do we support industry? One of the key activities is around awareness raising. Next point, please. And we have one of the first and largest open access repositories for circular economy for all sectors of the economy on our website. In terms of knowledge sharing, in addition to webinars and collaborations with Holland Circular Hotspot like today, we also have thematic working groups which are focusing on areas that are important to industry in Ireland, ranging from the bioeconomy procurement to the focus of 2021, which is design, packaging, and plastics. Next point, please. In terms of capacity building, again, in addition to activities like today, we do in-depth circularity assessments where we develop registers of opportunities for our industry members. We have developed a circular economy maturity self-assessment toolkit, and we run circular economy training for different sectors. In terms of our activities around demonstrating the circular economy in Ireland and supporting new ventures to scale, we have an internal ring-fence innovation fund, which the 2022 call will close at the end of October. We have a new venture program. The next cohort will open for members in the summer. And in terms of ecosystem collaboration, it goes beyond saying that ultimately echoing Ambassador Palm and Freek that international collaboration is an imperative in order to accelerate Ireland's transition to a circular economy. Next slide, please. The last thing I want to say, and one of the reasons why we're here today, is that Ireland is on a very kind of rapid acceleration towards the circular economy, and we're at a pivotal point in the process. The government is committed to embracing and embedding the circular economy as an economic model in the economy. And we have a public consultation on the first whole of government circular economy strategy. We also have the Environmental Protection Agency's a consultation on their circular economy program, both of which point to the sectoral roadmap for construction, what the construction and built environment sector should be doing. So what I'd like to just say here is that for all of those on the call, particularly from industry, it's an important opportunity to have your voice heard. Next point, please. Circulaire actually at the moment has a very, very short survey. It won't take more than 7 minutes. If people are kind of feeling like they can't go through the whole areas of the formal consultations, there's an opportunity to participate through Circulaire's submission. We're delighted to have experts from both the Netherlands and Ireland here today, and very excited to see where collaboration opportunities can go from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Geraldine. It's an amazing coalition behind Circulaire, and what a great momentum to have this webinar in time. We will continue with our program, and we're excited to say that we have 3 Dutch speakers and 3 Irish speaking who will set the scene. And we will be looking at the state of the art. We will show you that circular economy is happening. It's happening today, and it's happening by front runners, but we'll also have to realize that it will not be enough. We need to scale up, and we need to scale up fast. So we hope to learn from all the mistakes that the Dutch made in the past, and we aim to leapfrog by adopting some of their best actions as well. We will address hopefully the barriers that industry encounters today and explore options, what's the best way forward. Now, of course, the speakers would like to know who is in this virtual room. We had more than 180 registered participants, but we don't know where they're from, what's their background. So to help them a little bit, we have created a poll. You can see at the bottom of your screen that there is a poll functionality. And what we want to know is, where do you come from? You will see a couple of categories popping up. Choose the one which you feel most comfortable with that represents your background. So take your time. We see there is a lively action going on. We allow for some more time. Consultants are in the lead as present, followed by policymakers. But still there, some of the participants are still reflecting on which category they should be. So we'll allow for 10 more seconds. And 88% of us have voted. We're approaching the end. Okay, let's see the result. I think this will give the speakers a good idea. We have a fair bit of everything, and that's good news because we need everybody on board to make circular economy happening. Public, private, knowledge institutes, waste managers, co-developers, contractors, architects, etc. So this is interesting. Let's continue with our program. And we will start with Wytze Kuijper from Cirkelstad. And if I would summarize the power, let's say his presentation, it would probably be the power of the local action. Wytze, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Freek, and welcome Ireland. As I told you, I'm Wytze Kuijper from Cirkelstad, and I'd like to take you along in the what Cirkelstad is all about in Holland. We are a platform for progressive and public and private parties that work towards a no waste and inclusive cities. It's funded by its participating partners and program assignments we received from the government. Next. Cirkelstad stands for a vision on a system approach to force breakthroughs towards a lasting new market logic. And that is all about people, people in projects, people in organizations. And that's where the power is starting and the movement actually gets its foothold. Next. Because can we expect progressive logic from here, from the policies, from the government? Or how do we get policy in a fast lane? And there where we have been putting our challenge as Cirkelstad. Next. Because what we see is that, and that's what the market is experiencing, is conflicting policies and political priorities. So the role of Cirkelstad as bottom-up movement is to fill up the gaps, organize the chaos, and challenge the system. Next. And how do we do that? And what is the history? One back. Yeah, no, one back. One back. Yeah, that's right. It all started with 4 people, 3 organizations, 1 city, and 1 project in 2006. And today we are organized as a corporation with more than 3,500 people, 220 organizations, organized in 33 cities, and influence already more than 100 projects. Next. And we do that also with, in the midst of professionalizing our corporation with a college of ambassadors, a supervisory board, and a management team of which I'm part of. Next. So Cirkelstad is based on a diverse community, currently in 33 cities. It's a community of practice where people are coming together and exchange knowledge and information at the basic level. Next. On top of that, we make programs to take proactive initiative to create and supercharge projects. Next. We use the build-up knowledge to create new policies and norms for a new market logic. So we are a policy influencer, learning from more than 100 projects which are already realized. Next. Next to our communities of practice in currently 33 cities, we build subject communities in national and international level to strengthen the movement. Next. And the whole movement is supported by the development of tools and is available through our Cirkelstad Academy. Next. This is the way we work towards the tipping point. And we can not do this alone. So that's why I'm very happy to be part of this Irish community today. So we work towards a European Green Deal coalition. And then to go more into depth on the construction and demolition insights we have currently in Holland. It all starts in the beginning with visualizing and mapping resources flows. But that's only the beginning. Next, what we see actually currently in the market is an involvement of wording, representing actually also the opportunity for business, from garbage to waste to recycling to reuse. Nowadays they talk about harvesting and urban mining. Next. And this is actually one of the most successful companies in Holland, a New Horizon, which is a new kid on the block and is currently challenging the status quo of the current demolition parties. But we see also a lot of tools in which we develop together here with the community and the municipality of Amsterdam. It's a smart city register. It's a material passport based on resources and insights per area. And actually that gives us a lot of insight. Next. Because what we make visible is actually not only where the materials are, but when we look into demolition projects, we see also that a lot of things are unknown. So nowadays we are talking about releasability index. We are talking about a reusability index. There is a residual value index. So step by step, we developing tools to create the right insights and indicators to actually get the know-how, which we will use in the front end. Because what do we do with all this knowledge? We actually exchange and compare the regular demolition with the programs for upcycling and downcycling. And we see actually that we become a financial influencer because the residual value is actually creating a new financial system. But we also become a tax influencer because less tax on labor and more tax on virgin materials and projects. And all this knowledge we bring to the front. We translate these insights to design and material principles. And actually, these are so basic that it actually is understandable for everybody. And exactly this kind of insights we want to bring also to Ireland. So we become, with this, also an influencer for procurement and purchasing procedures. Next. And one of the biggest things which is actually going internationally now, so we warmly introduce this also today to Ireland, is our product platform. Here our product not only registered as circular alternative, but they're also independently validated. And that is very important actually to get a proper comparison, not only on environment, but also on circularity and also on health. So I would say, will you join us? Start asking questions and less talk, more do. I hope to come quickly to Ireland. Looking forward.
Thank you so much, Wytze, and an amazing amount of activities that's taking place in Cirkelstad in quite a lot of Dutch municipalities. I'm sure there will be more questions also about the product catalog you mentioned, and I'm curious to see how Cirkelstad can help also Irish communities. Time is relentless. We immediately move on to the next speaker, and the next speaker comes from the recycling branch. The next speaker is Otto Friebel, Director of BRBS Recycling, and he has an intriguing title of his presentation, From Zero to Hero. Otto, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Freek, for giving me the floor to introduce BRBS Recycling and what we have achieved on construction of recycling on construction and demolition waste in the last 41 years. And of course, good morning, Ireland. Next, please. BRBS Recycling is the leading branch organization when it comes to construction and demolition waste in the Netherlands, with over 70 recycling companies as a member, more than 200 operational sites. And as an organization, we represent about 1/3 of the total waste materials that are being produced in the Netherlands. Next, please. Now, looking from above, our planet looks like heaven, but when we zoom in, we are facing a lot of problems now and in the future. Next, please. First of all, we see growing waste mountains all over the world. And then next, please, we see a lot of problems of litter on land And of course, the next one, plastic soup. And last but not least, even raw material scarcity is one of the problems we are facing. And the next one, even sand, as you might know, is becoming scarce. So in the US, there's the expression, the perfect storm. And that's a storm that is the result of all conditions being perfect to contribute to a storm of biblical magnitude. The world, the energy sector, a whole system of production and consumption is in this storm. Now, our consumption patterns are affecting the world, as plastic waste is already found at the North Pole itself. Climate is changing as it's absorbing the greenhouse gases that we emit, and people die on a daily basis as a result of air pollution or climate-inflicted weather changes. But you could see us as this bulk carrier. We see the storm coming, but are we timely able to change course? Now, there's a lot of things we can do, of course, like reduce, and then the next, reuse and recycle. And yeah, we might call this an evolution. But next, please. What we really need is a revolution and not an evolution. Now, in 1997, the Dutch politician Ad Lansing introduced what later would be known as Lansing's ladder, or the waste hierarchy, as a reaction or a conclusion on the Club of Rome and the Brundtland Report. Now, as a branch, we need a good cooperation with the government. And this resulted in 1995 in a ban on landfill of construction and demolition waste, which has led, as you can see later in the slideshow, to a recycling percentage of 88% in 2006 and even 93% in 2016. Now, the national end of waste regulation for aggregates boosted the recycling percentage for this type of waste to 99.5%. Could you please go one back? Thank you. But just to be frank, this regulation, end of waste regulation, took us 4 to 5 years together with the Ministry of Environment to get there. Now, as you can see in this slide, the recycling percentages are increasing through the years. So you have to read it from the right side to the left side. But the reduction of waste is something we still have to work on. So the blue ones are the recycling percentages, and the orange ones are the orange ones are the recycling percentages, and the blue ones are the tons. So the tons are remaining the same, but the percentages is increasing. Next one, please. Well, since Michael Braungart and Bill McDonough introduced the cradle-to-cradle philosophy in 2002, we are talking more and more about upcycling and downcycling. However, really objective definitions on up or downcycling are hard to make. Now, the Dutch PBL organization introduced their first, and I hope I give you the good translation, Integral Circular Economy Report. And they hold up the mirror for the circular community and their stakeholders. Now, this slide shows the need for primary raw materials on the left side, like gravel, sand, and cement. What we recycle, the stock that we have in our economy, so that's the middle green part, and what we recycle every year, and what's being downcycled and upcycled. There we need this perfect storm that I mentioned earlier. As you can see, we only use 1 million tons, so the one dot in the middle, of concrete and new concrete. The remaining 11 million tons are still being used as a foundation for road construction, which is of course a solution when you need good materials, but at the same time, this concrete can be used for the construction of buildings and bridges. And then other materials could be used for road foundation. Next one, please. So we need to use all the possible and available secondary raw materials to fill the gap between demand and availability. The orange line is the demand that we need in time, and the blue line is the total of materials that we can supply. So there's really a huge gap in the need for materials. And this morning in the Financiële Dagblad, which is freely translated the Financial Times for the Netherlands, there was an article about the fact that raw materials are getting more and more expensive, and even harder to get. So it's really a topic at these days. Next one, please.
Please round up.
As a branch organization, we facilitate our members in developing markets for concrete. Next one, please. For plastics. Next one, wood, and for ferros. And then the last one, hopefully, this is my personal goal, hopefully when I retire somewhere around 2030, then I would like to have reached my personal goal. And that would be that when we Google or we search on Wikipedia for waste, this page doesn't exist anymore and we're only talking about resources. So this was my story from BRBS recycling, and I hope you can use it in the future.
Thank you so much, Otto. We'll be curious to see if we can really go from concrete to concrete again. I have a very quick follow-up question for you, Otto. I've seen amazing percentages of recycling of construction demolition waste, high in the 90%. If you could answer 3 elements which are at the basis of the success of this high recycling numbers in less than a minute, what would be those 3 points? Otto, you're muted.
I was too soon. The first one is technique. You need good equipment, good materials. I think the second one is a very good cooperation with the Dutch government. And the third one, of course, is entrepreneurship. And that's what we are doing in the Netherlands. Even in the last year when Corona was really a problem, there are still entrepreneurs who invested millions of euros in new installations and new techniques.
Good. No, they are the real heroes of the circular economy. Yeah? They take guts, they invest, and they, in the end, are responsible for scaling up.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Otto. Let's move on to the next speaker, which is Ton van der Giessen, the CEO of Van Werven, and he will specifically talk about rigid plastics, of which a large part come from construction and demolition waste. And you have to remember that Van Werven is the largest rigid plastic recycler in the Netherlands, and he has an office in both Ireland and Northern Ireland. Ton, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Freek. Next, for the opportunity to tell you something. I think this explains where we are located since several years. Northern Ireland, Ireland, as Freek told, with 2 locations. What are we doing there? Next slide. We are getting in bulky, rigid plastic waste, mostly coming from environmental stations of municipalities, but also for construction and demolition waste. And what you see is a variety of all type of different plastic material. And we have to sort that in 25 different types of plastic. And at the end, next slide, please, we sell it in 50 different types based on consumers' needs as secondary raw material. And where it is used, next slide, please, mostly in new products in the automotive industry, construction sector, but also in packaging, as you can see on this slide. Next one, please. Maybe look to construction and demolition waste. Of course, plastic is a very small percentage in weight. Concrete and other kinds of debris are much bigger in tons, but it is big in volume. And the other effect is that it has also a big effect on the savings on CO2. Next slide, please. With our total capacity in Europe, we have a CO2 saving, but you can compare with 200,000 electrical cars. And that is 7 times the number of electrical cars in Ireland. And CO2, when that's important, of course, then this will help to change also our climate strategy. Last slide, please. What are our problems to achieve more volumes in Ireland? Because we still have to import at the moment the material from the UK to have a full capacity on our locations. So our need is to have more Irish plastic waste into our both locations. And when we grow, the next problem is when we want to grow, we also need another location. And for sure, in the Republic of Ireland, it's very difficult to find a place to do this kind of recycling activities. You need a big area, you need also an environmental permit. And at the moment, that's really a hurdle. So maybe policymakers can think about making that point a little bit more easy. Of course, we need a permit, we know that, but when it takes many years to achieve that, it could be a little bit too late. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Ton. I think you will forgive me if I describe you as a very streetwise serial entrepreneur who's been around in the waste management field for a long time. If you look at the Irish reality today, what would you say is needed for a plastic recycling business model?
Yeah, to have an economical, feasible business model, you need at the front side a price that can compare to landfill or incineration. And the more expensive that one will be, the more plastic we can recycle. And of course, on the other hand, the price for raw material is also very important. Last year, it was really a problem with the low prices of oil and too much stocks of primary plastics. This year, life is a little bit more easy, but we need both sides. And maybe next year in 2022, I hope the European Union will give a recycled content obligation for plastic products, and then primary prices are not connected to secondary material prices anymore. And that would be the best solution for that.
Thank you for that, Ton. In 30 seconds, you were very efficient in your time with the slides, so I can give you a quick follow-up question. What is needed in your eyes to develop the plastic recycling market in Ireland? What would be the top 3 that Ireland can do at this moment?
Yeah, I should say it's not allowed anymore to landfill or burn plastic recyclable waste.
Okay, that's a very efficient answer. Thanks for that. We'll see you later during the Q&A. Do not forget to send in your questions to Wytze, to Otto and Ton, and all the Irish speakers, which will follow up now. We will fly virtually to Ireland now to listen to the Irish industry representatives who are joined by Micheál Keohane from the BAM group, and we'll talk about offsite construction, how it can benefit from a circular economy principles. Micheál, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Freek. I guess, guys, one of the things that we look at here is looking at as an industry, we have a massive impact on the environment from our perspective. And what we do now, the homes and the roads that we're building at the moment, they shape the world for the next 100 years. And I think as an industry, we've started to understand a little bit how we structure that. We've started to understand how we go, to construct, to make it easy to maintain and make it easy to operate. This is a whole new way of thinking from a circular perspective, certainly from an Irish context, and we don't make disposable objects. Everything that we make is something that's very much permanent. And I suppose we have to make sure that what we're building today is appropriate for what the way the world will be shaped in 100 years. So if we could just jump to the next slide, please. Yeah, so as the guys have explained, one of the things that we're looking at the moment is having 36% of all waste generated across the EU in construction is incredibly significant. And when we start to look at population growth from between 2021 and 2050, we're looking at increasing in population globally by up to 2 billion people, which is a massive, massive influx of people in a reasonably short period of time. And there's also this mass migration idea that over 50% of these people are going to live in cities by 2050. Now, whether home working and COVID has acted as a kind of a breaker for that, we won't know. But that kind of emphasizes the necessity for flexibility. And by within the next 80 years, there's a significant change in the aging economy. So it looks like we're going to move from 1/5 of people being over the age of 65 to almost 1/3 of people being over the age of 65. And the amount of people over the age of 80 is going to triple. So that's going to change, that's going to have a significant changing needs in what's required from residents or from a domestic construction perspective. So on the next slide, I guess what we're looking at is the old model where we used to build, demolish, and then rebuild, and everything goes to landfill. That has to change. That has to evolve completely. So on the next slide, I think what we're focusing on here is looking at the commoditization of construction. So effectively, when we're looking at somebody's home, we're not looking at a home, we're looking at elements of that home. So we're building in modular construction. So in base terms, we build boxes and transport them to site. So the 2-bedroom module that you see here is what we'd make in a factory, and then we stick them together on site. So in the next slide, we start with what a typical 3-bedroom unit would look like. And this is a typical starter home in Ireland. You know, so we have 4 modules. We can build typically to about 90% complete a home in about 4 hours. So a 3-bedroom house in modular construction. But the issue that we have with that is that very often a person who's building a starter home doesn't need a 3-bedroom house or doesn't want to pay the mortgage on a 3-bedroom house. So it's about that flexibility in design, and it's about using each of those modules as a commodity. So you can have a 1-bedroom unit. So as a starter home, you can have a 1-bedroom unit. If you get married and have children or expand in the family, or other people move in, you can expand that unit by lifting off the roof, adding 2 more modules on. And then you can also downsize afterwards. So post this, you could take the roof off if you wanted to downsize after your children have moved out, and take the upstairs modules out. And then the intention is that they're fully reusable. They're completely reusable in their current state. So if it takes us 4 hours to build a house, we can deconstruct a couple of modules out of a house in a similar time period and adjust and amend a residence. So it's just getting that circular thinking around the home. And on the next slide, it's just a couple of more demonstrations of what we're looking at with this. It's about having that ability and that flexibility within your residence to adjust it and amend it in such a way that you can live and work in that space if that's the change that has happened in your life at that point in time. And then the unit, instead of trying to reconstruct or deconstruct, you can just take apart that modular house and sell on that additional module that you've created. So it's just, I suppose, that thought process of making things as efficient as possible. And one of the things that as Otto had mentioned earlier, this perfect storm of materials, we're in that space at the moment where it's incredibly difficult to find materials and to get material for projects. So the fact that we can reutilize a module in its entirety is very efficient, and it means that as an industry, we can adjust and adapt and effectively create Lego blocks of our homes. And it's something that can be done today. Thank you.
Thank you, Micheál. Very interesting. How would you say that offsite is developing? Is it taking? Is it starting? Is it taking off in the market right now?
Yeah, it was a little bit slower over the last, I suppose 4 or 5 years ago. It was a little bit slower, and there was a little bit of skepticism around it. Now we're at a point where there's a massive interest in it, and the vast majority of developers in Ireland are moving towards it, and a lot of the government departments and semi-state bodies are also looking at offsite manufacturing, because there's a massive skills shortage. It's not whether we decide to go to offsite, it's when we decide to go to offsite, because it's going to be a necessity because of the skill shortage alone.
And do you think public-private partnership can make a difference? Is there more dynamism for this kind of construction, for this kind of solutions?
There hasn't been to date. There hasn't been, but it absolutely could, you know, and it should, because I think that there's a massive opportunity to here. If you look at what the guys in Homes England are doing, Homes England have partnered with Offsite Volumetric Manufacturing Facility as a partner, and they're delivering homes on a daily basis. You know, and trying to facilitate resolving their housing crisis. So I think that that's a good lesson for a lot of governments, and it's something that can be adopted quite easily.
We'll remember that one. Thank you so much, Micheál. We move on to the next speaker, and that's yet another construction leader. That's VisionBuilt, and that's the offsite arm for John and Sisk and Son, represented by Managing Director Brian Kennedy. Brian, the honor is yours.
Good morning, all, and thank Freek for this opportunity to present on what is a really important agenda for our industry. You can go to the next slide, please. So the three topics is just where we are on our sustainability roadmap, the key enablers for circularity, and also interesting project we're involved in European circular project around retrofit. Next, please. So you can go to the next slide. Just honors what we do as a business. So we're a UK and Irish based business. We manufacture in the west of Ireland. Offsite manufacturing, our base product is light gauge steel, and we provide a service from pre-design right through to installation. Next. So on our journey and on our roadmap, as a business, we've launched our sustainability roadmap for 2030 earlier this year. So that revolves around three sort of pillars: people, planet, and performance. And I suppose the key pillars and themes for circularity are around that caring for the environment and how quick we can get to a circular economy and how we can drive that from a business manufacturing point of view. A key enabler for that is embracing innovation and digitalization, and I'll talk about that in a few slides. Next, please. So what does the roadmap look like? The building today, caring for tomorrow is the theme behind it. We've 21 targets, very aggressive targets to meet by 2030. And one of the key ones around circularity is embedding a number of key principles in all our operations for circularity by 2023. And there's some key KPIs and measurables around that. The key circular enablers for us to do this are on the next slide. So products, so the first aspect, focusing on products. How do we bring elements together? Micheál mentioned how they bring volumes together in different aspects. We also do similar, and we also bring smaller elements like panelized construction together to form assembled modules that's easy to disassemble, and always thinking about that reuse, recycle. So steel as a product is highly recyclable once it's designed, developed, and detailed in the correct manner. Next, please. So around the process and how we get to that. So products is one thing. The second thing is process, and design from DFMAD is critical to the success, and involving manufacturers, involving designers, involving customers early in this process, developing details, developing design that works for the end user, but also works for a disassemble and assemble manufacturing environment is critical. That's where we can reduce costs and have a critical impact on the circular economy and the reuse of building in the future. Next, please. The other aspect is around technology, so intelligent building. What we do is we track products. We really focus on tracking, traceability, and data. So in all our buildings, the handover to the end customer from construction through to life cycle is in the data and what's in that building from a technical point of view. So all the various elements, all the various kits that's in that building, whether it be sensors or QR codes, that they're tracked right through their life cycle. And that allows designers in the future to think about, rather than think about demolition, to think about disassembly, reuse of these parts in a different way, and how it can be efficiently used in the future. Next, please. So a project that we're working on currently is a European circular project called Drive Zero. Next slide, please. So what Drive Zero is, it's been ongoing since 2019 and due to be complete in 2023. And what this is, it's brought together expert partners for the Irish consortium of TU Dublin, Cody's, Westmeath County Council, and ourselves. And what we've been looking at is how we can efficiently create, decarbonize, and look at the renovation process and how circular it can be. And this is a combination of using 3D modular construction, volumetric, and also using panelized construction, similar to what Micheál mentioned about adding on, but doing it in a retrofit method. As Freek and the guys mentioned, there's a major challenge with our existing stock and how inefficient it is. And the process of bringing that up to regulation into an A rating or B rating home is quite labor intensive, quite energy intensive, and certainly not circular. So a key outcome of this project, and it's really on target to produce, is what them systems can be, what them panels can be, and what them modules look like to allow our semi-detached, detached homes, apartment blocks, to be retrofitted in a circular manner that can be reused in the future. So it's a great consortium of people brought together. So thank you for your time. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much. Very interesting. Also, the last project you've shown, also I think the role of design is very important in order to allow for circular use and reuse of a building. Design is crucial again. If I look at you with the experience you and your company have, what would you see as the main barriers to circular opportunities in Ireland? How would you summarize them?
Yeah, I think in Ireland, one aspect that we've challenged with is around the procurement process, and there's no silver bullet to solve this, but certainly the earlier engagement from manufacturers, we see it happening more, so in the last previous while, but that has to be a key enabler to allow manufacturers, allow designers, allow clients get early involvement, look at the detail, and the devil is in the detail in a lot of these circular designs, and get that early involvement. And think looking at the procurement and policy making around that and how we can get that early involvement is critical.
Thanks. We have 1 year of COVID-19 behind us. If I look at my work, it has given a huge boost to digitization and acceptance for digitization. How would you rate the importance of a digital transformation for your work?
Yeah, I think everything we do is in a digital platform, because it's a CNC process and manufacturing is highly automated, and we work in that environment, and it's absolutely critical for the future and how we can reuse products in the future, knowing that we have that digital twin building, and how we can design that, have that data and have that intelligence that we can disassemble that in the future. And I think that has to be driven by digitalization. So again, I think policy making around that is critical for the success of it.
Can you make it very practical for the audience? Mention 2 items which could be digitized today?
Yeah, sure. I think certainly the use of building information modeling and bringing that to what we 4D and 5D construction sequence, and so how we digitalize the programming and the installation, I think that should be across the board for all projects, and also then the aspects that we call 6D, where we have that asset information handover to clients. I think again that should be mandated for all projects to be able to hand that digital model over to the client for end use. So I think them 2 aspects are critical.
Thanks a lot, Brian. We'll see you back during the Q&A. Don't forget to send in your questions using the Q&A functionality. We move to our last speaker, and actually we have lots of knowledge with us. We have the Irish Green Building Council with us, presented by CEO Pat Barry. Pat, I have great expectations. Over to you.
Great. Thanks for the invitation to speak. Next slide. So we've just, as well as start with, we've 8.5 years to meet the government target of cutting carbon in Ireland by 50%. So the race is on. Next slide. Baseline year for Ireland 2019 was 59 million tonnes of carbon. Ireland's got quite a strange carbon profile. Agriculture and transport making up a large bulk of it, but behind some of the other sectors, the construction industry spans across a whole range of different sectors. Next slide. And if we look at the embodied carbon required to build out our national development plan, Ireland's got an expanding population. We estimate that it would be about 4.2 million tonnes of carbon per year, which is equivalent to building 3 new coal plants. That's to build 30,000 homes, non-residential and infrastructure. Next slide. But if we were to actually, so just to give you an idea, what do we mean by embodied carbon? And to make it simple, it's the quantity of materials needed multiplied by the carbon intensity of the materials. So we have to keep both sides of that equation in mind. Next slide. So if we were to cut carbon from the embodied carbon in Ireland, it is possible to do it, cut embodied carbon by up to 60% by 2030, but it requires three key strategies. That's reducing the carbon intensity of the materials in the buildings. It's the optimization of space usage. For example, I'll give you the example, we built 5,000 homes in 2019 of an average size of 233 square meters. Just by optimizing that home size of under-occupied space, we could save 300,000 tons of carbon. So it's about reusing more of the space, empty space and vacant space within our existing towns and cities. So next slide. So one of the things we're trying to do around embodied carbon is reduce the carbon intensity. The slides seem to have run on a little bit, but we have an environmental product declaration program where we are enabling Irish manufacturers to declare the impact of their product. So just to give an example of 3 examples of circular products, we've got a recycled insulation, which has about 5 to 10% of the impact of a standard PIR insulation for the same impact. A recycled aggregate from demolition concrete, which is about 40% of the impact of a virgin aggregate. And we have recycled cement, which is about 5% of the impact of clinker. The slide just seems to be running on, but as part of what we were trying to do, we obviously got these slides on rotation, but we have started developing a national roadmap for embodied carbon and circularity in Ireland, and called Building Life, and we've brought together ambassadors from all across the construction industry to help us develop that over the next year. And part of that vision is a totally decarbonized, circular, resource-efficient built environment. But that's easy to do by 2050, but we have to have interim goals of 2030. And that means we should have at least 50% cut in embodied carbon intensity, and we must have a substantial reduction in virgin materials. Now, we still haven't defined what that substantial reduction should be, but that's why we would love to get a Holland Circular Hotspot involved and get the expertise from Holland and how we can achieve these targets. So next slide, please. So as part of this, we spoke about circular construction and modular construction. And one of the key parts of modular construction is that we have to, in order for those units to be reusable, they have to be designed to the optimum standard, so that they can be removed and reused in 10, 20 years time, and they will meet any future regulation. So, we have to design all of our buildings to a net zero carbon standard now. And the final slide is just an overview of some of the things we are doing around circularity and life cycle assessment. We are working on 3 projects. We are hoping to launch an early stage LCA tool later in the summer. We're hoping to trial circularity indicators, because one of the key parts about circularity in construction, it's too late when we're talking about demolition. We have to design all of our buildings to be flexible, reusable, to be able to disassemble them. So it's at the very early concept stage that we have to get things right, not just a demolition. And then we have to bring all of those together to make everything measurable, so then we can start to integrate that with development loans, with green mortgages, etc. So thank you very much. That's the last slide.
Thank you so much, Pat. the ambition is definitely there. So what if Ireland were to follow the roadmap? What would you say are the opportunities for Ireland in adopting the circularity here? I mean, when I look at the Netherlands, we sometimes express it in impact on greenhouse gases, sometimes in the material savings, sometimes in job opportunities or economic perspective. How would you relate this to Ireland?
Well, I think that's a very interesting opportunity at the moment. I have to mention the dreaded word Brexit, but you know, I went recently to the hardware store to buy some materials from my own house, and there wasn't any because there was a difficulty with imports. So there is an opportunity to create a more closed, you know, to manufacture more products in Ireland from using circular principles, using the materials we already have here, because we do import a lot of materials, and we could potentially, you know, we could potentially, both from our agricultural sector, provide more bio-based circular materials, but also reusing the materials that are already here. And there's a big opportunity to make better use of the buildings and vacant space we already have without needing to construct as much. So there's huge opportunities there if we look at circularity in the round.
Let me give you one of the questions from one of the attendees, from Martin Langendijk. What's your view on the use of wood as primary building materials? For instance, I know that in the Amsterdam Zuidas, there is a new building from the ABN AMRO Bank, and they've seriously reduced concrete by, for instance, having solid wooden beams installed. And actually, you can make skyscrapers from wood. How do you see as the Green Building Council constructions in wood?
That's definitely an opportunity, particularly given the land mass we have and the potential to, from forestry. We have a lot of private forestry that's reaching maturity over the next 10 years. And provided we can continue to replant, we can, you know, over the next 20, 30 years, we could certainly have a supply of timber where we could meet more of our building needs from our own native forestry. So definitely, it's a huge opportunity, but I suppose we have to build up an industry in things like cross-laminated timber. We have to build up, you know, there's certain barriers to be overcome around things like fire regulations, but it's certainly an opportunity if we, you know, if we put in place the infrastructure now.
That's a good point to exchange information about. Also in Holland and in the Nordics, there are lots of activities going on in this field. Thank you, Pat. We now move on to the Q&A with all the speakers, and thank you for actively engaging in the Q&A already and using the chat. We have our 6 speakers and we have lots of questions. Let me warm them up and then I will choose some questions from the Q&A. Wytze, I didn't give you the opportunity for a question yet. There are lots of activities going on at the local level. Do we have to wait for national government to create a market and standard? How can, for instance, how does Cirkelstad look at that? And what could you mean for your Irish counterparts? I actually have 2 questions for you.
Now, sometimes in Holland we make the joke policy is for laggards. So definitely as Cirkelstad we're not waiting for the policies. And actually, we are in the luxury that after so many years of experience, that we are an equal sparring partner to the government to see how we actually in a more speed up scenario. So a policy in the fast lane can make bigger steps. And actually that is because we have also a lot of learnings from the energy transition. And there we saw actually a similar way of step-by-step improvement. And the market actually is coming with a proactive approach. We can do much better. You ask the right question, and we can deliver. But let's scale up together to that next level. So actually, there is a proactive market approach towards solutions for social housing. For in Holland, 1 million houses have to be built over the coming 10 years. So even we are asked now to write the policies in the city deal. a circular and conceptual building, to write those policies and actually deliver them on the level. And we do that together with the market. So actually we are challenging the government to the maximum extent, and they actually appreciate that a lot.
So thanks for that. A real entrepreneur doesn't wait for the government to make regulation, and the same counts actually for cities. And Elon Musk didn't wait for an American president to make regulation for electric cars, for example. So we have potential.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Ton, there was a question about this, let's say, the permitting. You work in 8 countries. Could you compare Ireland to your experience in other countries in this field? And is it really an obstacle, or is it something you can live with? I don't hear you yet, Ton.
Hopefully you can hear me now, Freek.
Yes.
Okay. Yes, it is an obstacle, and of course, in every country it takes time, but mostly it is done within 6 months. And in Ireland, it takes a lot of more time. And the other problem is the end of waste criteria. That's also what we want to achieve, because otherwise it's very difficult to deliver the secondary raw material to a company which doesn't have a waste permit. And that's not the idea when you want to produce nice plastic products, of course. So 2 elements what can be a good solution for the nearby future.
Thank you for that, Ton. Let's move to 2 of our Irish speakers, Micheál and Brian. What's the construction sector in Ireland doing to replace virgin aggregate with recycled aggregate? And does it need government to impose a tax for virgin aggregate or mandatory recycled content to get the construction sector moving in this direction? Question from Connor Welsh. Brian, can I start with you?
Yeah, I think there's some moves, Freek, in terms of using a lot of aerated concrete is one example that's become more popular. Lighter concrete methods, but it is slow. It is slow. And what we use, I suppose, predominantly a lot of our building products is steel, and we focus on the recycled content of steel and then the design for reuse. So that's where a lot of our focus in VisionBuilt is.
Over to you, Micheál. Same question.
Yeah, we can see it. There's a little bit of, I suppose, regulation around the reuse of products as well in aggregates. So I think that regulation probably needs to change a little bit as well, particularly around reuse on site and between sites. So there's I suppose, a little bit of a policy change that may need to happen, to recognize the environmental benefits of being able to reuse some of the aggregates.
Otto, I have a similar question to you. We got some, let's say, friendly nudges from Wytze saying, yes, the recycling rate is very high in the Netherlands, but lots of it is downcycled under roads. What are you lobbying for to actually go towards more aggregate use? What's the situation in the Netherlands right now? What's on your lobby?
Well, thank you, Freek, and Wytze, of course, for your question. What we are facing right now is there are certain groups who are now lobbying, and we are lobbying for that as well, to prevent concrete for being used as a road construction material. So instead of concrete, just put something else on the road and use the concrete in new concrete. And there is also some certification coming up, a CSC certification, in which recycled aggregates or recycled concrete give you a better standard in your certification for a new building or a new concrete product. So we definitely see some light in the tunnel, and hopefully within a couple of years, these 10 million tons that we still have no market for, because we can supply a good quality, but what can you do with good quality when there's no demand? So we need to improve the demand for concrete, and then we can upcycle or at least recycle on the same level again.
Thank you, Otto. I will be back with you later. A question for our 3 Irish panelists, Micheál, Brian, and Pat. Well, think about your biggest barriers in Ireland. What do you envy most from the Dutch examples? And if Ireland could adopt one solution with priority from the Netherlands, what would that be from your own professional experience? I will start with you, Pat.
Well, I suppose one thing is Holland has had regulations around embodied carbon since 2011, which has, I imagine, has helped drive innovation in the market. And for example, the use of shadow pricing within government procurement is, in government procurement, there is very strong green public procurement within the Dutch government. And since, there's been all of these collaborations between government and industry to drive innovation in the market. That's the type of thing we would love to replicate. I could go on endlessly about the things that Holland has been doing over the past 10 years, but I'll let Brian and Michael come in.
Yeah, I think from our side, similar to Pat, I think the whole collaboration is really interesting. How they drive that innovation by collaboration between government, between industry, between customers and end users, and how we can get that in a method that's just the norm in Ireland is I think critical for innovation. And then the other aspect to that is certification, and how we can mobilize that quite quickly and drive innovation through product certification, testing, etc. And having that expertise probably more locally here around testing centres, etc. And I know there's a lot of work being done in Ireland to drive that as well.
Micheál?
Yeah, I totally concur with the guys, and to follow on from Brian's point, the fire testing in particular is something that is, really a barrier at the moment with regard to the testing of any material and any products that we're putting into the units. And as one of the queries came up about the use of timber, we'd love to be using things like cross-laminated timber in our modular products. It's lighter, it's sustainable, it's a really good quality product. It performs really well in fire. But from a fire perspective, we have a system here that is a little bit difficult to work with at times, because you could have approval from one fire officer and not approval 5 miles away from a different fire officer. So I think that assistance from the government in the certification of materials, and then also that consistent approval, so the ability to say these products are approved for use and that's it, and then that means that you can use them throughout any building as you wish.
Thanks, Micheál, for that. So we have heard certification, testing, approval, public procurement, and also collaboration. Collaboration is an interesting one. Let me continue on that part. Do we have the right talent available in Ireland for your companies? What about education, the leaders of tomorrow, the consumers of tomorrow? Is it something we can pick up? Maybe this is a question for Pat to start with.
Well, I suppose that's a fairly broad question on collaboration or on education. We've had some very good programs in the schools around educating children, and that's been incredibly powerful. But we need to bring that now further up the age groups through industry and upskilling within the construction sector around waste and circularity. And that is starting to happen. There are some great programs being rolled out. I know Galway Mayo Institute of Technology are rolling out a postgraduate in circularity in September. So there are quite a few initiatives now coming through on education.
Thanks, Pat. In Holland, we sometimes joke that circular economy is 20% about technological innovation and 80% about social innovation. So definitely aspects we need to consider as well. Wytze, I come back to you. Obviously, you bring in lots of experience from, 33 Dutch municipalities. What can you do towards your, let's say, your friends in Ireland? Do you have twinning programs or something they can benefit of, all in the spirit of collaboration?
Now, yes, for sure. As I mentioned, it's important to work towards a more European setting. We believe also that regulations and having a front position maybe in Holland on circularity is nice. But if Europe is not moving along, We see that for a lot of product producers and that kind of companies, they see then, okay, Holland is maybe a little bit more tough, and we move to other countries. So we see that we have to collaborate also abroad. So therefore, yeah, we do it partly already in Scandinavia. We have some samples running in the UK. So definitely, we are looking to go hand in hand and to bring up and bring in our experience. But as we heard already today, also some nice things are also happening in Ireland already. So it's not that we prefer to have office there, but I think when we have a twin program, as you mentioned it already, I think that's a nice word for it. I think it's extremely important to work towards that model.
Yeah, circular economy is not about copyright, it's about the right to copy. So that would be great. For all the audience, make a comment, make a link to Wytze if you want to know more. Ton, I'm going back to you and touching an always difficult and technical topic, extended producer responsibility. Is producer responsibility on the part of building materials or suppliers a component in the Netherlands? Do you see that happening in the future? Is there something you can share on this topic?
Yeah, no, it is not in the Netherlands. It's not used for construction and demolition materials, and I think it's also not necessary. There is a business model what can run on itself when there is a good policy around how to handle waste, and that's always on national level from the national government how they want to do that. And then you don't need for this kind of material an EPR system.
So if EPR is not necessary, I saw another question regarding the carrot and the stick in the Netherlands. So if EPR is maybe not needed, what is needed? What have been the best carrot and sticks in the Netherlands, according to you?
Yeah, it's not allowed to landfill this kind of waste. There is a ban, a clear ban. First, they started with a high tax, and at the end, it was a ban on landfilling of construction and demolition waste. And on the other hand, there is also a tax on incineration, and that gives more room for recycling business models.
Thanks, Ton. A question for Otto. I see a question from Barry Donovan. What developments, if any, are happening in Ireland, Holland for recycling of concrete rubble into new cement concrete for use in new buildings? Otto, I start with you.
Could you please rephrase the question, Freek, because it was going very quickly.
Okay, it's in the question box as well. What developments, if any, are happening in Ireland and Holland for recycling concrete rubble into new cement concrete for use in new buildings? I'm thinking about smart crushers and things like that as well.
Well, I don't have so much experience on smart crushers. But what I do know is that, well, the Dutch government made some experimental space in their policy, and that makes it easier for recyclers or concrete companies or construction companies to start experimenting on certain products or on certain business models in a cooperation with each other. So I think that that's one of the most important developments right now.
Okay, in addition, let's say there is some new technology on the market, let's say the smart crusher and sometimes by other names, which instead of breaking old concrete into small pieces of concrete, they're basically separating the individual fractions, including the cement fraction, which has a lot of hydration power. And that might be an interesting development to follow for the future, as it is the most energy intensive part of concrete, of course.
That might be, Freek, but just one thing then, because we still need market for those various fractions, and we still need to understand what happens with those, for instance, cement fractions. Is it really cement, or do you still need some extra additives? What do you get out of that again? So it's experimental. We are absolutely watching it, but we need to keep our feet on the floor, and that's what we always do in the Netherlands. So first prove and then cheer.
Right, the pragmatic Dutch approach. Thanks. Any references from Ireland? Micheál, from your side, from BAM?
Yeah, there's very little. I suppose I would say there's very little happening on this side with regard to the reuse in new cement and new concrete, and it's something that you know, as Otto said, you know, the most energy intensive pieces that they're the elements that we need to focus on, you know, because there's no point in solving the problem that, you know, that's the smallest element of it, you know. So we should be looking at the I suppose an 80-20 rule on it, you know, but it's certainly very, very limited in Ireland. Like we do have GGBS and you know, we have worked quite a lot with it, and you know, it's encouraged and it's certainly being specified on a lot of projects, but it's not, I would imagine it's not a mainstream process and product at the moment.
Thanks, Micheál. A question for Brian. It's about measuring circularity. It seems to be a gap in current research and development. What would help you most? Which kind of, let's say, alignment on measuring circularity would help you?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the key challenges around measurement. I think if every product, obviously we go through our LCA process, and if every product then is looked at and given an index, and if there's an index, maybe this is something that's been developed in Holland around indexes for different product materials and how it can be reused. I think, and in relation to the aggregate and the use of concrete, I think how concrete is used in terms of its pre-assembled manner rather than traditional. Here in Ireland, we're very traditionally sensed in how we put concrete together in an in situ fashion. And I think if we can look at it in a different way and how we assemble parts of it together and then reuse them, and then if each of them can have an index, that might be one idea, Freek.
Thanks. This is probably also a question I want Pat to reflect on. Measuring circularity. Which research do you think is needed in this field?
Well, I suppose we just started a project on trying to measure circularity indicators for buildings, but that there's a number of, there's an ISO standard, I don't remember the name, and I don't remember the number right now, but circularity indicators, we're looking at early stage on how you design a building for circularity. And sometimes there can be a certain amount of contradiction between circularity and embodied carbon, because if you're designing for flexibility, sometimes you might want to have a slightly higher loading factor for your foundations, because that allows you know, greater use potential in the future. You might want to have slightly increased heights. And then that brings in also things like disassembly, the ability to disconnect components such as floors from walls, etc. So there's quite a lot of indicators in trying to measure circularity that go from the very earliest design stage right through to the completion, disassembly of building, and the actual separation out of the different components and measuring the actual, you know, recycled content in the products going into the buildings. So it's quite a large field that we are trying to get on top of, and that's what we would love to share some of the experience in Holland over from your past 15 years.
Yeah, we can see how we can connect you to also our institutes in this field. It's for sure lots of development going on. And if you can measure something, you can manage it. But what do you want to measure? Is it greenhouse gas impact indeed? Is it health, safety and environment impact? Do you use it the material balance, or is it total cost of ownership? There are quite some different items here. One question on collaboration, and Otto, I give it to you. Forgive me for saying so, you're working end of pipe, but then again, waste management can be a catalyst for the circular economy. How did you start to reach out over the value chain? How do you collaborate with industry, with the builders, with the material guys? Which advice can you share to our Irish friends?
Well, as a branch organization for recycling, our members, some of our members also have some concrete centrals, so they make their own concrete. So that's we have recycling, but we also produce concrete. That on the one hand. On the other hand, looking in the chain, we also work together with demolishers. There's also a branch organization for demolishing companies called Veras. They are working in the Netherlands and they're quite well known. And we work with them as well. So we need to understand what we are doing and why we're doing things in order to create a good market and a solid market. So we are working on the one side with the demolishers and on the other side with the producers of new concrete.
Okay, now you're actually engaging in the contact in the value chain. Thank you for that. Ton, why did you invest in Ireland? Why do you believe in this market? And what would be your advice to develop this market more? What do you need for your next steps, for instance?
We were already active in the UK and we got a lot of questions from Ireland if they could also deliver their plastics to our location in Selby in the Midlands. And that was the idea, why should we let them go over with plastics? What is the next step maybe for us to increase our capacity and to step in Ireland? And I think Ireland is just big enough to have not 10 of those companies, but when you are the first one, hopefully after a certain period of putting some extra money in it, we can have a better business model also in Ireland itself. But until now, it's going the other way around. So now we are importing in Ireland based from the UK. So there is an opportunity to have more from the Irish market itself.
Thank you, Ton. At least I have to say that with the UK in a Brexit situation, we have seen that Ireland has become a lot more visible to us. It's as if the UK has sunk and we can look over the UK towards Ireland, and that offers lots of new opportunities. We've come almost to the end of our webinar, and I would like to give the floor to Dr. Geraldine to give the honor and also the challenge to summarize what we have heard and share her findings with her and maybe next steps. Geraldine, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Freek. So we've been on an amazing kind of exploration and journey over the last 90 minutes. I want to just start by kind of highlighting Ambassador Palm's kind of call to the fact that the circular economy should be the economic model of the future. Freek highlighted that in Ireland, 35% of public spending is on roads and housing. And again, I think something that we need to get out there into the ecosystem is that circular copyright, it's not about circular copyrights, it's about the right to copy. Freek, you should trademark that. In terms of Kuijper from Cirkelstad, he highlighted how building on the Dutch's circular building policy, they've essentially fostered public-private collaboration and the importance of the right indicators, the importance of the right procurement. And that feeds on really nicely to others who've spoken about the need for the design in order to avoid waste, ultimately, shifting away from dealing with the end of pipe. When we heard from Otto Friebel from BRBS Recycling, he stressed the fact that it's about a revolution. And essentially how in the Netherlands, there was a ban on landfill of C&D waste. And essentially that now there is a lobbying occurring to do with ensuring that essentially concrete is not used for backfill. He also flagged that it's really important to develop trust between sectors and local and national governments to get collaboration. We heard that from Micheál and Brian, that it's a need to get collaboration between industry, associations and government working together to solve these challenges and unlocking the barriers. From Ton van der Giessen from Van Werven, we heard about the fact that in terms of his experience of trying to increase the reuse and recycling of plastics from C&D waste, that there are challenges with regards to permitting in Ireland. However, there's still, it is still a good place to do business. And he stressed the fact that the EU is bringing to the fore essentially a recycled content obligation. That's really significant, and for Irish industry to also be aware that that's coming down the line. He highlighted the fact that EPRs are not necessary if we have robust, apologies, phone going off in my background. There's essentially you don't need EPR schemes when you have a strong national policy and a viable business model. He highlighted also the fact that it's really important, and what they found in the Netherlands, to separate the costing of primary materials and those indexing for secondary raw materials. And ultimately, shifting to the Irish perspective, we heard from BAMS about the importance of designing buildings for the next 100 years, that they are fit for purpose, the importance of off-site and modular construction to enable that. He also highlighted the fact that this is being done in addition to the Netherlands and the likes of the UK, with Home England doing this to address the housing crisis, something that is a key area for development in Ireland with regards to addressing our own housing crisis. He also stressed the role of procurement. When we heard from Brian Kennedy from VisionBuilt, who highlighted the role of digitization as a key enabler of circularity in construction, the use of building information modeling, the importance of 4D and 5D construction, and then the fact that ultimately the asset information from these construction builds needing to be handed over to the client to enable future use, and ultimately that kind of shift towards building as material banks, buildings as services, the role of that data being pivotal to enabling, essentially extending the life of these buildings. We also heard that certification and measurement, the indexing is really important. We heard from Pat Barry from Irish Green Business Council stressing we have 8.5 years to cut Ireland's CO2 in half to meet our government targets of 2030. The importance and highlighting of measurements again, life cycle analysis, embedded carbon, the fact that in the Netherlands that you've had regulation around embedded carbon since 2011. But also highlighting when it comes to measurement, ultimately there sometimes can be contradictions if you're designing for multiple use lives as opposed to single use when it comes to embedded carbon. And last but not least, that ultimately collaborate. The dialogue that is needed between industry and government is so important. And I guess I would just echo the points I made at the very beginning, that there are consultations open now. The government wants to hear from Irish industry. And again, thank you very much on behalf of Circulaire to both Ambassador Palm and Freek for the opportunity to bring this dialogue to life in the Irish ecosystem.
Thank you so much, Geraldine. That was wonderful. You did a hell of a job. I have absolutely nothing to add, but let me share probably the hidden Dutch secret, and that has to do with attitude, because the Dutch are very pragmatic, learning by doing. If we wait for a perfect world, well, we probably will be too late, especially looking at, let's say, construction, demolition waste and the impact they have. So just do it. Look for like-minded soul, and let's say the first movers often can have the biggest market opportunities also in Ireland. So we hope to have inspired you today. It was really a pleasure to be with you. We hope that this is not a one-off event, but the start of another journey and more collaboration. Thank you to the organizers, Circulaire, the Netherlands Embassy in Ireland, and a final thank you to all the wonderful speakers, Wytze, Otto, Ton, Micheál, Brian and Pat. You've been wonderful. We learned a lot from you, and it was really fun setting up this event with you. So this is the closure of this webinar. We will share the presentation and any open question which is there with you afterwards. Do keep in touch. Remember, today is the first day of the rest of your life. Let's make it the circular one. See you next time. Thank you.